All right, as we begin our exploration into the world of 2D design, it's important to understand that the goal of design is to activate the space. That is, we want to engage our viewer and lead them through the composition so that they observe the composition and become engaged with the content. Now, we'll discuss this in considerably more detail, and we'll revisit this again and again and again. But for now, we're going to just deal with some of the basic ideas of composition. So let's just start essentially with our format. It's a square. It's balanced, it's stable, it's solid. It's neither landscape nor is it portrait. In other words, it doesn't really give us anything. The square requires care to create the dynamics that we'll be working with because it doesn't give you anything. So basically, our composition is what forces the square to become a active space. So let's look at our first concept, form. Okay, form is essentially something that's on the canvas. So our canvas is the dot, is the surface, and our dot is the form, otherwise known as the figure-ground relationship. So our little point right here, and we talked about points in the previous exercise, it's small, right? It's small in relationship to the overall format. It's diminutive. And we just decided to put our point right in the middle because that's what we do, right? It's the most comfortable place. It's in the middle. It's stable. It's weightless, but it's also stagnant. It doesn't have any activity, right? Our eye goes right to the middle, bullseye. We hit the bullseye, nowhere else to go, so we're gone, right? So what we need to do is activate that space. A simple movement is all it takes to get the space to become more active. Our dot's still our little point, but now we have a relationship between the ground and the figure. And this is what's known as the emphasis of the minority. In other words, the little thing, even though it's little, becomes the most important thing because it's surrounded by so much space. So what we'll do is we will add a little bit more interest to our composition. At this point, we've now added two elements, and the relationship between the two elements becomes more important than the relationship of any form to the figure, to the ground. And so what happens now is that our eye moves back and forth between the two points. We then move out to the space because it kind of lends itself to the fact that there's nothing here, nothing there. So we come back. So we go back and forth probably a couple of times. And then, of course, we're done. There's not much else to look at. So let's make this a little bit more interesting. What we've done is we've added some repetition because all of the dots are the same size and they're the same color. And so that's repetition, but it's also adding the concept of concentration. Concentration is essentially when you have a lot of elements in one place in the composition. The gravity in concentration holds elements together. It creates an active area in the composition, and yet we still have all this negative space. So we go, oh wow, all this stuff going on in here, negative space, nothing happening, back to the concentration, possibly back to the negative space again, and then we're probably gone. So we've created quite a bit of interest by simply adding that concentration. Now, if we add more activity, basically what we've just done is we've created radiation. We now have a sense of a spot where the energy started, and then everything is now moving off into the space. And so if we think of a fireworks, for example, as a perfect example of radiation, we have that center point where the explosion occurred, and then everything flies out from that point. Very powerful tool. So let's return to our two dots for a moment, and let's talk a little bit about the relationship between the two dots in a more dramatic way. We can now add scale. So now we've added a very important concept called contrast. Contrast is really when you have two things that are very, very different. It could be black and white, it could be little and big, It could be red and green. It could be anything that has a strong sense of being opposite of the other element. And so that is that's contrast. And also what we've done is we've added the element of the illusion of space. Space does not occur in 2D space, obviously. We only have horizontal and vertical. And so basically what we've done is we've created that illusion. The large element appears to advance, the small element appears to recede. So that concept of space is very powerful in addition to the sense of contrast.